to another episode of Monster Talk Live.
I thought you were going to say based on a true story or something else there.
No. This is serious live stuff here that we're doing. And welcome everyone.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Did you introduce yourself?
My name is Matt. I'm Matt.
I'm Karen, everyone.
And I'm Blake.
Hi, Blake.
And I'm underdressed, apparently.
Well, tonight's topic is paranormal in the news. So here we go.
And well, this was inspired by an upcoming episode that we have on the Demon House in Gary, Indiana, which I believe is coming out tonight. And so, yeah, we thought this would be an interesting topic because, I think this is one of the ways that I became interested in the paranormal and paranormal claims and skepticism just through seeing, watching the news and hearing about these kinds of stories and going and legend tripping, checking these places out, and trying to find out more about them over the years. So that's really why we're doing the topic. And I guess there are lots of stories that don't make it to the news as well. They're just kind of, I guess, local folklore and urban legends, but a substantial amount do make it to the news. I think with quite some frequency, there are stories about Bigfoot or ghosts or angels in the news. And I think we're always kind of trying to combat them. And I think over the years, we've thought about doing a show, I guess, treating news stories as they come out, but I think they're too frequent really to tackle. Every tale
the life cycle and the life cycle of the story often only lasts like a week. Like it'll like pop in the news, it's a mystery, and then the solution comes out. They don't want to talk about that and they just drop it,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like a hot tater.
But yeah, and usually they're kind of the fluff pieces that they have at the end of the news program.
And what's the music at the end of the news piece?
The X-Files.
The X-Files. And I've been wondering, because that is so universal, what did they do before the X-Files was on TV? I'm guessing Twilight Zone. Yeah, exactly. It's like that, such an iconic bit of music. That I don't have a direct recollection of news stories with the Twilight Zone music, but I'm betting that's exactly what I figured would be. Yeah.
And so Stu, I just wanted to say that the Demon House is not a new paranormal show. We have a new based on a true story based on the Demon House that will be at some point coming out. So that's what Stu is asking. And Stu, you actually feature in this episode of Monster Talk Live. So enjoy.
Yeah. Well, we get around to Matt's stories, but I guess we'll start with my stuff. I've got a couple of tales from Australia. So these are the kinds of stories that they're not new, but they do continue to crop up in the news. That could be because Halloween's approaching or because there's a new sighting. And we have talked about this first topic before, the Waikhurst Parkway. Blake, do you remember me mentioning this road? It's a haunted road in Sydney.
The Vanishing Hitchhiker. Yes, I do. Yep.
Yes. So I think, Matt, we've got some pictures here.
We do. Give me just one moment and I will bring up a picture or two.
But yeah, it's known as Australia's most haunted road.
First off, make sure you like and subscribe and join us over on Patreon. We would appreciate it very much.
Where you'll get more cursing, more bad jokes, and no commercials.
Even more bad jokes. So yeah, Waikhurst Parkway. So yeah, here's a sign. So Australia's most haunted road. I don't know if there's an America's most haunted road, is there? I guess they all claim to be.
Well, it's the extraterrestrial highway.
Well, the one around here is Riverdale Road.
That's right.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
Yep.
Is that because of the Archie comics?
Jughead is dangerous. Yeah.
So yeah, this is a 16 kilometre stretch of road in Sydney that goes from North Narrabeen to Seaforth. It's a really beautiful area. And this road, at times, it's extremely busy. At other times, it's very lonely and no lights. So it can be pretty dangerous. So you do tend to get a lot of crashes and, sadly, a lot of fatalities in that area. So I think that is really the source of a lot of these stories. But I think it's interesting because when I was a kid, and I think there's going to be a lot of that tonight. When I was a kid, when I was a girl, the ghosts
there won't be any of that for me, but
were less expensive. But they were certainly different. The stories were different. But the main story that's doing and that's no.
Yeah, I'll go back.
That is the main story here with Wakehurst Parkway is a vanishing hitchhiker tale. So when I was a kid, again, there were lots of different ghost stories connected to the Wakehurst Parkway. But now the main story is about a woman named Kelly. And people will be driving along the road and they'll see a woman. Sometimes she's wearing a white dress, or she's dressed in period dress, as they always say, or she might be dressed as a bride. And she's standing by the side of the road. And so sometimes people will pull over to offer her a lift or a ride, as you would say here. And she gets into the car, and after you've driven, you've talked, she doesn't say very much. You've gone a couple of kilometers, couple of miles, and then suddenly she disappears. You don't have that. There's no cemeteries that you drive past that I can remember anyway. So it's not like a lot of the stories here where you drive past a cemetery and the person's getting dropped off at home. They disappear around that area.
But do you think, if you think there's no cemeteries, but phonetically, not literally how it's spelled, but phonetically it is wake and then a hearse and then a road. So you don't go to the cemetery thing, you go to the road. That makes a lot of sense phonetically.
Yeah, it is cool. It is kind of a creepy name. It really does make you think of wakes and hearses. It's Hurst with a T. But I get it. But anyway, so with this story, I think it's got an interesting, violent twist as well, because the claims are that sometimes she will just hop into your car. And I've heard those kinds of stories before, where you look in the rear vision mirror and there's a ghost in the back seat. The vanishing hitchhiker is already in the car with you. You didn't stop. She or he is already in the car. But the interesting twist is that if you don't tell her to leave, she'll take control of the car. So if you don't tell her to get out, then she'll take over and drive into a tree or drive off the road and cause an accident. So it's an interesting urban legend to account for all of the crashes and the fatalities that take place here. But what I think is interesting too is that there are a number of similar ghosts. There's a ghost of a nun that walks this area, and a nurse as well. So people are saying nowadays, just over the decades, they're kind of conflating a lot of these stories. It doesn't seem like there are any real accidents that are associated with these ghosts or vanishing hitchhikers. But nowadays, people think, oh, this is just the same ghost, just variations on a theme over time. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a really old road. It was built during World War II, basically to create employment for people who were unemployed post-Depression era. And so it's kind of called the Forgotten Road nowadays too, because over the years, lots of politicians have talked about widening the road, introducing safety measures, or extending the road so that it leads straight into the city, into Sydney. But they've never done anything like that. So it's just become a hazard, especially with flooding. They get a lot of flooding around there over the past couple of years. So it's a pretty dangerous place. You can see why it would be associated with, I guess, ghosts and death and terrible stuff like that. Now, Matt, you have been on the road with me.
Yes.
Do you think it's a little bit like the Riverdale Road? I mean, it has that same feel.
I do. Driving down Riverdale Road, there's a multitude of possibilities. There's a gates of hell. There's a crazy driver that will play chicken with you and try to run you off the road and kill you. There's a vanishing hitchhiker. There's various things. I myself was killed on that road, much like I was on the Wakehurst Parkway. So I see a lot of similarities.
Before you died, did you sense that a woman was trying to tell you how to drive? Because I get that a lot myself. I've never picked up a hitchhiker, but I do.
Sexist joke time.
I wish it was a joke.
Poor downtrodden.
Mine was.
Kathleen says the problem with this
just a joke.
Kathleen says the problem is that you guys are driving on the wrong side of the road. That's why there's so many accidents. So
that's a really good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Especially, over there when you let a yank drive,
or vice versa too.
Yeah, and I'm letting all of the people know that they're on the wrong side of the road, and as I hanging out the window screaming at
when
them.
you jet lagged, yeah.
So
the next story,
recipe for accidents.
Yeah, indeed. But the next story, this is related to the Wake Coast Parkway, and this is brand new. I can't believe this, Blake. I used to live at the top of the hill that it just comes up from this area here. So this is Narrabeen Lagoon, and apparently there's a lake monster.
Oh wow!
Or a lagoon monster, I guess. So it's Australia's Loch Ness monster, I guess. But I'd never heard about this.
Yeah, we've stayed right on the shore of this lake multiple times.
Well, yeah, we have. We stayed at the. It's a beautiful caravan park. I guess it's got a different meaning in Australia. It's more like a kind of resort.
Yeah, it's not a trailer park. Yeah.
It's not a trailer park, no. But yeah, so this story, I heard about it maybe around Halloween last year. So it goes back to the 1960s, 1968. And apparently there was a woman called Mabel Walsh and her nephew, John. So they were driving along Wake Coast Parkway right beside Narrabeen Lake there. And they claimed to see a strange creature. So it was described as 4 feet tall and standing in shallow water, and it had skin like an elephant's, and it had small front legs.
Wait a minute. Was this the last picture that you sent me?
Yes.
That okay, because I didn't put that in. I will bring this up though. I've got to bring up this picture.
You have to, because we've got an artist rendition, and now you're going to go through everything to get through.
No. I'm there may be some tears here, but I'm gonna get out of this and I'm gonna find this.
So yeah, it had
ridiculous.
It had, let me describe it for everyone. It had small front legs and it walked on thick, round hind legs, and it ambled out of the lake into the scrub. So the scrub's kind of the bush, and its head resembled an anteater's. But I think this rendition is a little bit different.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That sounds pretty close to what we're talking about here. So yeah, let me.
So apparently, at the same time, there'd been a rash of UFO sightings around that area, and I wasn't aware of that either. So here it is.
Wow.
Yeah, so sort of an anteater, a little bit elephants.
That's kind of adorable.
A little bit country, a little bit of rock and roll.
Adorable, yeah. I don't know about that. I would be more scared of the brown snakes in Narrabeen Lagoon, to be honest.
Mm.
Plenty of those. I've seen them myself. So
fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway. Even throughout the 1970s too, there were various claims that people had seen a creature with a trunk, so like that, variations on that theme that had been sloshing around in the water. So yeah, I thought that was fascinating because I grew up very close to that area, just at the top of the hill, and I'd never heard about it. So apparently the story goes back to the 60s.
Wow.
Interesting.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough.
A couple more stories from Australia. Quarantine Station, and I have spoken about this place before. Nowadays it's called the Q Station. Yeah. I love it. I used to spend so much time there as a kid and as a teenager, and there's an interesting link to the Wake Coast Parkway with this story again, because the girl, Kelly, or the nun or the nurse, the woman that's associated with the Wake Coast Parkway, some people believe that she actually worked here at the Quarantine Station. So she was going to work. She was going to work when she had an accident of some kind, and that's how she wound up being a ghost haunting the lonely road there. So yeah, the Quarantine Station, that was running from the 1830s through to the 1980s. So it was kind of like Ellis Island, an equivalent to that. And so if there were cases of smallpox or cholera, typhoid fever, even bubonic plague, they had about 15 cases of bubonic plague going back to the 20th century in Australia, in the Sydney area. So people they'd have to stop there for, I think, 40 days and experience a period of quarantine, staying away from the rest of the community in Sydney. And so, Matt, you have actually been there a number of times with me.
Yeah.
And now that it's this lovely resort and it's a conference center as well, the Q Station, you've stayed there with me. What do you think of the place?
That was the first place that I encountered an Australian huntsman spider.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it
so
was
not a ghost, but a spider.
Yeah, but it was a baby. It was about yay big.
It was like 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
Weighed 150 pounds.
Very cute, just like the monster.
Adorable. But no, it was very cool. I mean, you could see that picture on the left, up on the top of the picture there above the trees. That's where we stayed, and the view was amazing. It was just a lot of fun. It really was. And there weren't very many people there on the night that we went, the first night we went, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And the history is just beautiful. And Karen's got wonderful ghost stories to go with it. So I had a great time.
Well, that's the thing. I was going there for so long that I had heard a lot of the stories that nowadays the tourists, the tour guides don't even know. So I used to annoy tour guides by going along and telling people the stories that they weren't aware of. But yeah, I mean, there are so many stories there. Every single building there is haunted, from the hospital barracks through to the hotel rooms as they are today. There's a hospital morgue that's particularly haunted, and a cottage. And I think I've spoken about the cottage before, that it was owned or was lived in by the grave digger, because they had, it's kind of like the Waverley Hills Sanitarium, where people will say, oh, there were 65,000 deaths, and there were about 6,000 deaths on record. So that's a huge amount still, nothing to sneeze at. But at the Q Station, people will say, oh, there were 6,000 deaths. And that's not the case. It was a couple of hundred deaths. And they did really a fantastic job for the time of containing a lot of diseases like tuberculosis and things that they didn't have treatment for, and protecting the rest of Sydney from these illnesses as well. So they really did a fantastic job, but there still were a lot of deaths there. And there's a little cemetery. I've gone for walks on the premises, and sometimes you'll just stumble across a little headstone somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So it's got a lot of ambience. It's the kind of place that you would imagine would be haunted, which is the kind of thing that we encounter a lot. Give a place some history, give it some heritage, give it some sickness and deaths and misfortune, and suddenly you've got yourself a cocktail for ghost stories.
When you turn it into a place for people to stay legitimately, you're going to get news stories that end up on the news.
Yes,
because everybody experiences something, and then they call the local network to say, "Ooh, look at this picture of this orb."
Exactly. I mean, they've had a couple of fires there, unfortunately, that have damaged some of the buildings. And whenever there is a story like that in the news, invariably you'll have people saying, oh, I saw the fires and I could see the ghosts of people who lived there or stayed there or worked there, standing by and crying and watching the fire and the damage to the buildings. And I mean, the stories crop up all the time. Again, whether it's Halloween or just people have had sightings. Now, they do ghost hunting there. They didn't when I used to live in that area. But nowadays they have overnight paranormal investigations where they have tools and equipment of ghost hunting, and it can cost a lot of money to attend one of these things. But I think that has really increased the level of sightings and hauntings over the years.
I would agree. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, it's a really great place to go to if you want to go on a history tour. But I think that they cash in a lot more on all of the hauntings and the claims of that. So just one more story from Australia. And I think that this kind of cleaves in nicely with the demon house. And it's a topic that Blake loves purely for the name, this particular claim. And so this is the Humpty,
certainly do. Yeah.
And he nearly walked all over it then.
Sorry.
No worries. The Humpty Doo poltergeist. So Humpty Doo, it's a town in the Northern Territory. So it's near Darwin. And yeah, this little house here became very famous in the 1990s. So about 1998, the place was extraordinarily haunted for about 4 months until the people living there were booted out by the landlord. So this story reminds me a lot of a number of other stories, both in Australia and in the United States and elsewhere. And when I go through it, you'll see shades of other stories too. So, excuse me, this family were terrorized by this poltergeist. And so there was all different kinds of poltergeist activity. They had stones thrown at the house and knives were thrown inside the house and batteries would fly around the house. All kinds of projectiles and objects would be hurtling around the room, hitting people. And this made me think of The Exorcist, but people would have words would appear on their skin, carved into their skin. So words like fire and skin, because every good demon should carve the word skin into someone's skin, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps they're learning English on words like help and car, as we can see here. So sometimes words would appear on the bathroom floor made from pebbles and rocks. So that's a great photograph there. And yeah, so a lot of that was
organized demon, labeling stuff so we could keep track of what's what, skin, floor.
Yeah.
You know, I think
stating that the bleeding obvious.
The one that says care or car, sorry, care. I think it probably was saying scared, and they started cleaning it up. Yeah, well, they started cleaning it up and they're like, no, and they took a picture of what was left. And car is just as scary because they drive on the wrong damn side of the road.
I think it's another reference back to that. But anyway, I remember this appearing on the news and they're still talking about it. People are still talking about this story. And so a number of things happened. They had invited a number of psychics and clairvoyants and priests and holy people to visit to get rid of this spirit, to cleanse the place. I thought it was interesting because they had a Greek Orthodox priest come through and bless the place. And they also had a Catholic priest come through and bless the place. And these people were interviewed and they reported that Bibles and holy books were flying around the place and holy water would be thrown around the room. And I mean, they claimed that they saw a lot of these things taking place too. And I see a lot of links to the Gyra ghost story, particularly with the stones throwing, the stone throwing spook. So we have covered that story before for Monster Talk. And that goes back to the 1920s in rural Australia, a very famous ghost story or poltergeist story. And so I saw a lot of shades of that story in this. But the fun thing about this one, and again, we will discuss it for Monster Talk, we'll go into a lot more detail. But when it was covered by the news, I think it was Channel 7, they went there and they stayed there for a couple of nights and basically filmed a lot of the goings on that were taking place there. And in the course of doing so, they found a number of the residents throwing things. They caught reflections of them throwing things and throwing knives and stones. And a couple of my friends from the Australian Skeptics at the time went and checked out the place too. And they found that there were kind of little clean patches on top of the fans. So they had dust all over the tops of the fans and then little battery-sized clean
circles.
Spots.
Yeah. On the ceiling fans, like this guy's looking up at the ceiling fan.
Yeah. So, you know what they were doing. They were basically placing objects on the fans, switching the fans on because if this is Darwin, it would have been extraordinarily hot. Then the fans spin around and projectiles, things going everywhere. Now, truly, I just, from what I know about this case, I don't believe that these people believed that they had a poltergeist. But here's an automatic writing. I don't know if that says tonight.
It does.
Tonight, Nice T? I don't know. It's hard to tell.
It could be an F. I don't know.
Yeah. Tonight, fun for all is what I'm guessing.
Maybe it's a cross. I'm not sure, but that makes me think of cases like Borley Rectory, the spirit writing on the walls. So I mean, they had everything going on here, but I just have to say with these people that you know, I mean, it could have been a case of pious fraud that they're trying to prove the things, and that was pretty much what they claimed. So here was a drawer full of things that had been thrown around the room.
Battery and shot glass.
And a shot glass, yeah. Love that. Very Australian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys ghosts know how to party.
But I mean, pebbles being tossed is like, that's classic poltergeist stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And so reminiscent of the Gyro ghost. That was really famous for that. And I think was actually, you know, happened in Australia in the 1920s. I do think it influenced a lot of activity, even in the United States. That was just so famous. So all around the world, people, you know, visited to check that out. It's still famous. But the interesting
I guess
thing
we're all
just
we're all just a stone's throw from a poltergeist haunting.
Indeed. Nicely said. But I think the interesting thing with this case is that the landlord came forward after these people had been evicted and said that they weren't paying their rent. So again, we're seeing shades of the demon house and other claims. And it seems like they were using this as an excuse to not pay their rent. Or we're besieged by paranormal activity, so we refuse to pay our rent. We should get to stay here for free. And it's a lot of sources will say that this took place over 4 days, and then other sources will say it was 4 months. So there's a huge range of claims and dates and stories, and it's a fun case anyway. And I think we should treat it for Monster Talk in a bit more detail.
I'm being really patient because I'm waiting for Blake to do this one. But you know, you've got a list, you know, basically of how are you going to stay in a place? And you've got a list of, you know, Humpty Doos and Humpty Don'ts, and they.
I think
no, I didn't think of that at all. Nicely done. So I'll be honest. I'm so in love with the name Humpty Doo. I don't want to tarnish it in any way. I think if I lived there, no matter what the circumstances, I would laugh every day. Just, I'm in Humpty Doo. That's
right.
Well, yeah, and I think we should go into the history of the name a bit more for the episode that we do. But
it's not going to spoil it, is it?
That we Humpty.
It's not going to be something really sad, is it?
No, I need to do a bit more research, but I think it could be an Aboriginal name. There are lots of different theories about it. But at any rate, I think Blake should probably move there someday, retire, go fishing.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I've been thinking about fishing for several days now. So yep.
Read your mind.
Absolutely.
Don't want to do that as a rule, though. So I think that's it from me. But I mean, those are old stories, but it's just remarkable how often they come back in the media. People continue to have sightings, and I mean, all the hallmarks of urban legends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So do you want me to go through a few?
I think so. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
okay.
This is really your thing. I think this is really how you got into this yourself.
Well, that's a good point, actually. Can we talk about that? Yeah. No. I mean, because for all the deserved complaints and criticisms we have about how media typically covers these kinds of stories, it's because of the media coverage that we often even hear of these things at all. So we are the aftermarket to the media, because they come in, they do their 2 or 3 days of journalism, and then they leave without closing out anything, and then it leaves it to the believers and the skeptics and everybody in between to try to find out what really happened. Yeah,
for sure.
Well, you know, I would say that my notoriety, I guess, kind of started because of this. You know, there's a guy here in Denver that was trying to start a, you know, ET Affairs Commission.
Remember that?
Yeah. And that was all over the news. And it was because one gentleman had proof of an alien looking in his window. So before they could actually get, to the press to show them their footage, me and Stu, who's in the chat room right now, we created our own version of the alien in the window because we had already seen his footage. We've been kind of following him for a while and chasing him down and trying to get him to tell the truth about things. But no, he only got worse. So we recreated his footage, which was not supposed to be able to be recreated.
I don't know how they could have said that. I mean, it was just so tacky.
It is, yeah, it's just so real that it would take a Hollywood studio to recreate it. So I didn't have a studio.
Didn't they say it would cost $100,000 to recreate?
Yeah, something like that, $200,000 or something crazy. Yeah. And I didn't have a studio, but I did have a Stu, and Stu did a great job of recreating this, and we got it out to the news before they could. And everybody thought that ours was the real footage, and thought that
to this day, your
footage
is shown as
actually
the real thing,
the alien. So it's very funny. Yeah, it is very funny that it happened that way. But that's kind of how got into it and started recreating a lot of these things that would come on the news. And here's one. I just have a couple of little clips from it, but I don't know if you remember the blue angel that visited the gas station, because that's exactly where a blue angel would go. So
to get some gas.
This footage is very, very, very low quality. But
that's the point. It's like Bigfoot.
Yeah, I think so. So.
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah. Oh, but there it is. Coming back. Wow. Now, if you look, you see the color of her outfit here. It's purple. No big deal, but you just kind of notice that. And then over here, you see her outfit is red. Okay. Not a huge deal, but it does kind of get important to realize what's actually going on here, because other people that have tried to debunk this, have said the obvious. It's a bug on the lens of the security camera. That's it. But why is it blue? Oh, that's mysterious. It's got to be an angel. And some skeptics said, oh, it's because it's reflecting the blue paint off the side of the wall. No, it's not. It's the camera's chip is not exactly set perfectly to get real color, because it's like the tint is off, because her outfit was purple when it was being shown on that camera. But when she walked inside and had the real camera on her, it was red. So it was shifting everything blue.
Maybe she had angels on her too.
Well, that's a good point. But why did they leave when she went inside? So here's a short little video that I made of some angels, and my angels are white, which I think is
that's more canon, cooler. Isn't it?
Yeah. And here's I feel so bad every time I see that. Can you guys see that one flopping around there?
Yeah.
I see it.
I'm so amused. I did this same experiment. We used me and my friend used little toy cars to recreate the gas station, and then put bugs on the lens to make the stuff. It worked pretty well.
Where is it? You should be showing it.
Yeah. There it is down there. Oh, mine? No, it was horrible. We did it with like a home. This was not even digital. This was like a VHS camera. Remember those? So,
well, these
original's pretty horrible.
These are fruit flies that you see in this, and I was the fruit fly wrangler.
Yep, I was the moth wrangler. There you go.
Yeah, and I will say you were the moth man.
Yeah.
On that one. But the thing is I would like to say that no fruit flies were harmed in the making of this video, but my big fat fingers were not all that good at keeping them protected.
Matt, you're gonna come back as a fruit fly.
I know.
In another life.
It's very sad. But as you can see, the camera was picking it up as that blur as white. And if the tint had been off on this camera, it would have been blue. That's really good enough, I think. Yeah, it does demonstrate that that's all that was.
Yeah, because
And,
you've got
oh
an
my Lord.
opaque item crawling around the lens, but because of the way the camera's working with the distances, it becomes transparent, basically. So
exactly.
very nifty, or translucent, I guess is the right word. So
now, have we all heard of
oh, well, I love this one.
Well,
Pockets Ghost? Now,
famous.
of course, I'm not the only one involved in this one. I mean, Penn and Teller on one of their BS programs, they did a good in-depth thing of this. But so yeah, you've got the Puckett's Ghost here. Oh, went right by. So it had been sort of remade by us, and you can see that if you dangle an action figure in front of the camera, you can get the same effect that one had. Can you guys see that kind of
G.I. Joe
around there? Yeah,
Barbie.
yeah. Exactly. So it's kind of floating around out there. But let's shift away from ghosts for just a moment, and let's talk about UFOs. And Stu's going to love this one, because if you watch closely, you will see these UFOs flying all over.
Oh, look at them go.
Yeah. Now, see what happened is this
they're very fast.
Yeah. Now, this is an aviation expert looking at this going, oh, those aren't airplanes. Those aren't airplanes. So Sasquatch actually reported this.
Oh my God.
As you can see. Or could have been Robin Williams. This was a few years ago.
Or Blake.
Or Blake, yeah. But the thing is where this was in December. So his claim was it couldn't have been bugs, because all bugs would be dead in Denver in December. But as you can see, it looked pretty nice out there. So Stu and I, again, we went up there to the exact same location where he filmed this, and it was hilarious because there was a ton of people up there with their cameras.
What area was that?
Well, it was called Federal Heights.
Okay.
So it was kind of north of Denver, and I was up on this hill, and there was a ton of other people out there with their cameras hoping to catch the aliens as well as they flew around. And we kept on trying to get a hold of the reporter and saying, no, you don't talk to an aviation expert. Talk to an entomologist, maybe, and see if they can identify them as bugs, because
it's like that old saying. What's the old saying? It's easier to catch a UFO with sugar than vinegar, I think.
Oh, yeah. That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Very famous saying.
Yeah. So the thing is we went up there and we caught about 10 to 12 different flying species of bugs,
flying saucers,
of flying aliens. So I mean, for about a year after that, every time I saw a fly, I would scream, "Ah, UFO!"
You still do that, Matt?
I might, but that was a very frustrating time, and trying to say, no, they're flying close to your camera. You're standing up there, you're kind of kicking up all the dirt and everything, and things are flying around, and it's they were 60, 65 degree days, so there was plenty of bugs flying around. It was very frustrating.
Well, I think what was frustrating for me, I remember I was living here at the time, and it was a recurring news story. And one reporter in particular was just hooked on this idea and would come back week after week with updates and just, there are some people who believe that these are just bugs and that's not true, and just really doubling down on the whole thing. And
she was like saying, talking about how, the people that disagree with me aren't nice people.
That's what it's all about. Just being nice.
Yes, is you can report anything you want as long as we're nice to you. So yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. But there's been so many of these kind of stories where bugs are either UFOs or ghosts being picked up by cameras that can't focus on them because they're too close. So it's pretty frustrating, for that kind of thing. But Blake, you're right. This is kind of what brings a lot of this stuff to our attention in the first place. So we get to go out and have a good time recreating things. And
I think it's interesting how some of these stories really stick around for a long time, and others appear and people come up with natural explanations, and then suddenly it's over and done with, and others really stay the course and are still around to this day, like the ones I've talked about in Australia. But yeah, just interesting, the lifespan of these stories and why some become cult stories and legends that really last, and others just kind of disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, it is bizarre.
It is, but that's a beautiful segue into the topic that I wanted to talk about, which is also relatively, this is fresh in the news, but it's also tied into old stories. And it also ties perfectly into how technology records things. And that is the very recent story of the Chinese balloon that crossed our country. It's not the story of the balloon, though. It's the way that the UFO community received the story of the balloon that I found the most interesting. Now, before those balloon stories happened, there was this big push. I think everybody in our audience is aware of this, about trying to switch UFOs to UAPs. And this story about this group called ATIP and another group called OSAP that were both investigating officially these sort of aerial phenomena through the Pentagon. But as we've talked about before, I'm going to say it again because you never know who's only going to see this one clip. You know, this will be their only exposure to it. Both of those organizations are tiny. Both of them are tied to Bigelow Airspace and Skinwalker Ranch, which is a ranch in Utah that was owned by Bigelow and was later purchased by
Bigelow.
What's that?
No,
not just Bigelow. I for some reason my old brain has forgotten his name. I don't want to say it wrong.
And I can't remember either.
The old Bigelow Aerospace is totally
Robert Bigelow. I don't know why.
Gives me a tick.
My old brain. Robert Bigelow. But he had formed this group.
Bob.
This all ties into Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM. It ties into George Knapp, Colm Kelleher, and some guys that worked at the they worked on some of the early remote viewing stuff, people that were tied to Uri Geller. So like, there's this like mainstream idea out there put out by the Bigelow people that they're investigating real physical material craft with advanced properties that is possibly from space. They don't know where it's from. It defies the laws of physics. It does all these amazing things. And they've got a ranch where they study this stuff, and they see portals and Bigfoots come and go and demons and strange aircraft. But if you really dig into it, even going back to before Coast to Coast AM, Bigelow was supporting Art Bell's original show, which openly was advertised by that group. And they advertised that they were looking into UFOs and the survival of consciousness. And that's where you run into this big thing that when people in the UFO community talk about consciousness, they're not talking about the neurological structures and the properties of the brain that, you know, the sort of that idea in science and biology that perhaps the mind is an emergent property of the brain. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about your soul. And because they're using a different word, it kind of slides in the same way that quantum means one thing to physicists and quantum means an entirely different thing to new age energy people. And so there's this disingenuous use of the media to promote the idea that our government's best technology can't sense these amazing futuristic aircraft that might be coming from another country or another dimension. And we just don't know. But the reality is that people behind this already have very specific ideas about what they think are going on. And they want to confirm those under the aegis of the U.S. government. So that's one thing that really bugs me.
Cell phones can detect them.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like when you really get down to it, it's the equipment. The first time we get these advances in these sightings is after we get new sensors on our aircraft. And then they kind of disappear for a while and we get new capabilities and new things appear. And when this balloon story happened, people were like, why couldn't we sense it? How was that sneaking around? And it turns out that our sensors are really very powerful. And we don't want to be sensing slow moving things like birds and kites and air animals and that sort of thing. And so balloons were considered a low risk. And those things were being filtered out of all the radar stuff. So when they changed those filters, suddenly we got an explosion of new sightings, which is to be expected. And then, of course, the media covers it like, oh, no, there's lots of balloons. We're being invaded, even though they've been here the whole time, but our equipment was filtering them out. So it is a complicated story that is being constantly manipulated by people who have agendas to advance. And on social media, I'm just going to say social media, there is a very vocal and interject. I don't want to say violent, just let's say that they're nasty. A lot of nasty UFO people who strongly believe in this stuff and relentlessly come after anyone who proposes that these might not be from another dimension. Anything that's mundane and explains it, or it trivializes it or makes it not a mystery, is an enemy of these people, in my opinion. So it's very frustrating to get into that.
I did an interview recently. It wasn't about monsters or anything like that. It was about the euphemism treadmill. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Blake, but it's an idea that, it's been around in linguistics for a long time, but Steven Pinker put a name to it. And it's basically where you have a term that becomes offensive. And so there's another term which is introduced to replace that. And then that sullies as well and develops negative connotations. And so there's another word used to replace that, and it goes on in this treadmill kind of pattern. And so you find that happening a lot with areas like stigmatized areas. So when we talk about disability, with a lot of older terms for disability and terms related to race and ethnicity. But I'm seeing the same kind of thing happening here with UFOs. So you've got these new terms to refer to UFOs because they've now kind of become stigmatized. This is not a scientific term.
It's a rebranding.
A rebranding for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess when you think about an older term like flying saucers and how that is now ridiculed and associated with people who were less than scientific. And so, I just think we're seeing that same kind of thing here where
it's going to come back though. Flying saucers, that's going to come back, and I'm going to be ready for it.
Did it ever really leave?
No, of course not. Yes.
So, and maybe there's that too, but I just think it's interesting that these new terms are coming out. Oh no, this is real, this is science, but these other ones, they're not. We distance ourselves from them.
In a sense, that very idea is also very much in the news right now around culture wars, and I think one of the things that bugs me or worries me, maybe is a better way to put it, but it's the thing like take when I was a kid, it was the people who lived here before Columbus were Indians. Now, obviously, that's not very sensitive or accurate, and thousands and thousands of different tribes and cultures with their own histories, so calling them all one thing is a little silly anyway, but changing it to Native Americans, it may seem to the people saying that like they're doing something less offensive and therefore they're good people, but unless you're actually doing something to help those tribes, like it feels like
stigmatize them,
it feels it's like make me feel good without me having to do anything. That's the thing.
And a term like native has pejorated as well, and you've got terms like the natives are restless tonight, and I talk about all of this in my book On the Offensive, the drinking game for everyone watching.
Why don't I have one hold up here?
But that's certainly an area that's very rich, talking about immigrants as well, even just talking about embarrassing and taboo things like bathrooms, restrooms, toilets, a lot of turnover with terms, real revolving door. But just interesting to see them within this particular environment.
Well, in this same environment, you've got the UFO being changed into the UAP. But we also have things like people took the 1950s idea of Bigfoot. The term Sasquatch is only from like the 1930s, I think. So, it's a sort of a hybrid term for those creatures of folklore, but it might have meant different things to different tribes, as I was just saying. And then you get Bigfoot as a specific news story lead in the 1950s. But now you've got people who want to make it more serious. There was a little period where people were trying to make up scientific, binomial nomenclature, Linnaean type names for Bigfoot. And now it's the North American wood ape is the most recent, I think, term that people are trying to make it more serious. The wood ape.
Yeah, sounds
which
much more
pelted
scientific.
Paws, it sounds it, but then there, again, we still get that other schism of is it a natural creature or is it a paranormal entity? And so turns out, and you may not have heard of this as a linguist, but words are complicated. Like they mean a lot of different things, and they
over a
carry
long
so
period
much
of time. And sometimes,
they
take on new meanings and retain old ones. And semantics is wild.
Yeah, yeah, they really are. I mean, I want to take these things seriously, and then people do stuff like this, and it makes it so hard to even talk about it. And then all the people who are hopping into the UFO world around these pushes, these sort of cultural pushes around ATIP and that whole story of the Skinwalker Ranch, if that's their ground zero, then they're also missing everything that went back to 1947 and the first flying saucers. And that cultural story, that
flying
history,
saucer still is here.
Yeah, I mean, that history is much longer, but has almost changed not at all. Nothing new is under the sun. But
everything old is new again.
Yeah, it is really, really. Oh, it's so frustrating. And then to watch it on the news, when the balloon story broke, the news covered it with such excitement. It was like the OJ trial, when he was in the white Bronco. The chase and just cut to footage of that, or from Colorado, I believe, was it Balloon Boy in Colorado? I think
Balloon Boy was in Colorado.
Yes.
Remember tracking Balloon Boy? Oh my God,
crazy crap is either here or Florida. So
yeah. I just remember when the Balloon Boy story broke in the news, I looked at the thing I was seeing and how it was flying. I did a few calculations for how much helium you would need to lift a boy of the rough. And it was like, okay, that's not a kid in a balloon. That's just not right. I mean, it really took 5 minutes of math to work that out. That's impossible. And
for the average person who doesn't do that, that's a frightening story.
Yeah, but
especially if you got kids,
But if you're a journalist, people go to the journalists expecting that they're going to do some. What is that word?
Understanding
journalism.
It's my understanding that there would be no math.
Yeah.
Yellow journalism. There are still shades of that today, that kind of thing. And
is it journalism if all you're doing is repeating the story with no nuance, no investigation, no clarification, and no closure? Is that journalism?
For a lot of journalists, unfortunately, yes. Yeah,
that sounds like storytelling to me. And I don't go to the 6 o'clock storytelling hour. I go for the news.
Yeah. Well, watch BBC then.
Yeah, no kidding. So
how long do we give Bigelow to totally destroy the word aerospace and its credibility?
I'll say this about Mr. Bigelow. He puts his money where his mouth is. He really wants to investigate this stuff. I think his idea for a space hotel is really cool. I don't know how I would ever afford it, but the idea of going to space with my lovely wife and trying some things out that our old bodies can't do on Earth anymore would be cool. So
like Timothy Leary. But, I mean, usually you'll see changes with this kind of thing over a generation, maybe a couple of generations for things to kind of turn bad. So
yeah,
that's
we'll
interesting.
see.
But,
I don't know. I mean, eventually, his interest in consciousness research, and what we mean is afterlife research. I think that's maybe more important in a lot of ways to all of those people, but they don't make that clear when they cover this stuff in mainstream media. And
we're talking about sound bites. Couple of minutes.
It's all very sound bite, but I mean, it is a fundamental question. I mean, and we all get to find out the answer at some point, but
or do
I wish they were more. What's the opposite of it? Sincere or honest in the way that they approach these topics in the public. But obviously there's a market. He's a businessman. There's a marketing side to this,
It's like sex sells the paranormal sells, and often people really just want the kind of the sound bites and the fun stuff to repeat around the water cooler now that everyone's going back to work. And I think that's all people are really interested in. I mean, you do any research, any digging into these stories, as we've done a lot over the years. I mean, Blake, you've visited so many stories in the news and gone and researched them and tested them, and Matt as well. I mean, never found anything to come out to be paranormal.
But I can't stop looking.
What is addictive, I think.
It is a bit.
Doing these kinds of things and solving mysteries. And
it's why I think that hole, that gap in journalism leaves a spot for citizen researchers, but it's up to the audience. I think there needs to be a media savvy, critical thinking about the media and how to know where to go to find answers that are more thoroughly researched, are more scrupulous, are more well done. I mean, like more thorough, and sometimes that may take weeks and weeks of work, which most journalists have a deadline that's way sooner and that people want to get the news now. But I mean, anytime there's a major news story, I would advise everyone to be wary of the initial reports, because what comes out months later rarely has much to do with what was originally reported. So,
absolutely. True. I think in some ways they're really just kind of telling us storytelling, as you said, and really asking the questions, but certainly not providing the answers. And people are by and large more prone to belief and just hope that this is going to be something supernatural, something paranormal. And that's kind of what you're left with. And you're right. I mean, for skeptics, it really can take days, weeks, months to investigate these things and debunk them. And people don't want to believe that. And I think the takeaway message usually is, it's paranormal.
Yeah.
Not that there's a natural explanation.
Hence the X-Files theme. Hit it.
And we should end with that.
I'll edit that in.
Yeah. I tell you though, I think shows like Monster Talk are good gap fillers for those missing pieces from the media. So I appreciate everyone who tunes into the podcast, tunes into our YouTube channels, tunes into our books, and all the places where you can get a more nuanced and deeply researched. My wife's going to divorce me when I get upstairs. What? Better researched.
Lovely.
So don't forget, like and subscribe. And
please do
come on over to Patreon and see interesting stuff.
Leave a comment below and share our videos to Facebook and Twitter.
That's right.
Thanks for watching.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Blake, before we go, I've always wanted to do this. And since I'm dressed like this with this background and you're dressed like that with that background, what's that? Okay, now we're going to go to a local idiot who says he saw the Bigfoot. Go ahead. His name is Mike Hunt. Mike Hunt.
I just seen the back of him. I was coming out of the shower and I turned and the mirror on my medicine cabinet was open. I could see him going through my bathroom right where I was, almost right on me. But when I whirled around, he was gone because he's fast.
And that was a reference to an Australian news piece. I remember that. Yeah. The name that Matt came up with.
That's not a mockery of the South. I am from the South. I just genuinely try to hide that in my voice. So right. And now it's going to take me a minute to get it out of there. It
doesn't take much for you to slide right back into it.
It does not.
It's like me going home and sounding like Steve Irwin.
Crikey.
It's truth. On that note, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Good night.
Everybody have a great